Hello there. Welcome to SureFire Live. Thank you for joining me tonight. It's exciting. We're going to have Robert Hartline as my guest tonight. We met a couple of weeks ago at a entrepreneur organization meeting, and he came in and had some really great information for our group. And then I have asked him to be our keynote speaker at the SureFire Accelerator meeting that we're going to have for our small group. And he's going to be our keynote speaker. And he agreed tonight to do this with us. And I'm excited to have him. So before we bring him on, again, it's two-way conversation. This thing goes so much better when you give me your comments. You say hi, you say whatever you're thinking, because it kind of changes the way this goes. And our guest tonight is super experienced in business, and we'll get into all that. So please feel free to ask him questions, and I'm sure he has a take on most things. Hope you guys are going well with your busy season in the chimney industry. As you can see, I'm back in my home was being renovated, and I'm back in my office. And I noticed I had this gift from a German chimney sweep. My friend Andreas Gartner, when I went over there, he gave me this super cool Stein, a chimney sweep Stein. He's a chimney master over there in Germany, and just so cool, man. It was. I found it as I'm putting my stuff back on my shelves. As you can see, I'm kind of working on it. But anyway, it just made me it reminded me of him, and I hope he's watching tonight. So Andreas, if you are, I miss you. Hope to see you soon. So with that, let's just bring on Mr. Robert. Hey, man. Hey, how are you doing?
Mark, good to see you again. Good to connect with you. I'm excited to be on your show here.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking time to do that. I think the first time I heard of EOS was probably around 2012 or 13. And when I was looking up a little research before the show, that was about when you wrote the book. So I must have heard about it pretty quick. And so for those who don't know what EOS is and the traction thing, can you give us a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, EOS stands for Entrepreneur Operating System. And it was written by the book Traction, which came out around 2012. That's about the same time that I got the interest in the book. It was written by a gentleman by Gino Wickman, who started his entrepreneurial career around age 25. He's kind of brought in to help his family's business, ran that for several years. He understood it needed a turnaround and did that for 3 years, turning it around. And the next 7 years kind of running the business. And when he sold the business and he was transferring, his skills and energy from that business to a new leadership team, he started the EO chapter of Detroit. He's one of the founding 10 members of that organization. And he really understood over that transitional period when he's transitioning his old company to what he was going to do and move forward in, and kind of figured out he had a knack for helping businesses implement some very basic tools and structure to kind of run a business. And what EOS is just a series of tools that you use and strategies to help scale your organization. Right. And, for me, I read that book in 2012, tried to implement it myself with limited success, and eventually ended up hiring a coach to kind of navigate that experience.
Yeah, I think I did the same thing. A lot of us read that book like, man, these things make a lot of sense. And so we try to self-implement. But so to give everybody a background on, you've got a very interesting business background. Why did you want to implement this? What was your business before? And that kind of give us just some information on what you did.
Yeah, so I started my entrepreneurial journey selling phones door to door in 1994 when no one had a cell phone. And I was talking
phone to phone door. I mean, door to door phones,
door to door. And back then, who had a phone? An attorney, a doctor, right. A business owner. Important people had phones, and I was talking people into getting a phone. At that time, was just for safety and security. 94. Understand the phone that you had in 94 was a Motorola 8000. I had no caller ID. We had voicemail. That was pretty hip. There was no camera. There was no other use like we have today, right? So I sold door to door, and then I started a Nextel franchise in '98. And and honestly, until about 2012, it's pretty much a blur. You know, I
It's
was
pretty much a blur, he said.
a blur because you're just like by the seat of your pants, trying to run a business, trying to live a life as well, right? And part of why EOS stood out to me is I needed a better system, and I was trying to do everything on my own, even trying to implement traction on my own, not successful.
How many, and at one point you grew to a lot of branch offices. How many offices did you have?
So when I started the EOS journey, I was around 11 locations, about 10 million in sales. And one of the first things you do when you go through traction is design your vision. Okay.
Right.
What is your 10-year vision and what you want to have out of life and out of your business? And I had three things at the time. I was separated from my wife. So number one, I wanted to save my marriage. Number two, I wanted to grow my business to 100 million in sales in 10 years. And then number three, I wanted to move my family to Costa Rica and run the company from Costa Rica. That was the plan.
Really?
And within 3 years, I would do all three of those things because of this. So saved my marriage. We grew from 13 to 78 locations throughout the Southeast. When I started, I had about 110 people and ended up with about 450 team members. And in fact, I did move my family to Costa Rica, and I was on the show House Hunters International, picking our house out. I mean, the whole story about EOS is just a story of putting your dreams on paper, because everything begins in life through a thought. It's just a thought. It's just making something become a reality. And most of the time, we are so caught up in our day-to-day work that we don't even take the time to write down what we actually want. So what ends up happening for a lot of entrepreneurs, they wake up in a new reality, one which they did not design.
Right.
And so my passion in life is really helping people figure out what the heck do we want to do and who we want to be. And you can do that through just going through some simple exercises to figure out what you want.
Well, what you just said, rang true with me, because I had built a business, and then, in fact, I was your customer. We didn't know each other at the time. I used all your products in Nextel, and I went into your locations. We know each other at the time, but going through different journeys. But but for me, I grew a business that I absolutely hated. Like, I hated to go into work. Like, I literally remember driving up to my door thinking, man, do I want to go through this today? I remember being sick, like literally feeling physically sick before I went into work, because I had created such chaos that it was like arrows coming at me. As soon as I walked in the door, a million arrows at me. And man, and then, I went broke, and I just had to blame myself because of a lack of vision, a lack of traction, a lack of systems. And I didn't have all that stuff. But to your point, I just grew. Like, what do you do today? Work harder, and can I handle more stress? Of course I can, until you can't. And it seems like when I heard EOS in 2012, I'd gone through that in 2008. It just made a lot of sense to me when you read it and go through it. So talk about like people that you help, or who's a good candidate for somebody like you?
Well, generally it's someone that has, 10 or more employees. They generally, these are hardworking, open-minded people who are open to change, open to learning. These are people that are not comfortable with the status quo. They want more out of life. But at the same time, they also recognize that they have a real life to live outside of their business. But
Right.
we make our business an all-consuming function of our life, and it's really so powerful what I love about entrepreneurship is you can really create life out of nothing. And this entity can be out there existing with people and designing, making resources for us to live a much better life. And for other people, right? There's so many ways that an entrepreneur can really create life out of what a business can produce. But what we also tend to forget is we also are people and we have families, and they often are the ones that sacrifice for this other business. And that's the challenge that I hope to solve with people, is really helping them find who they really are when their business is working properly, so you can really work on living.
Yeah. Several years ago we had a training event called Lindemann University, and it was down in Puerto Rico. And there was a guy down there that was the EOS implementer, and he got a lot of us excited about EOS. And then, it all makes sense. We did the elevate and delegate exercise, and we learned about level 10 meetings and learned about the rocks that you need to do. And we all like, okay. And in true entrepreneur fashion, you go, okay, well, I can do that myself. And so we all start and do parts of it. What do you find to be the most common mistakes that we make when we all read and hear about it, and then we try to take the next step of doing it in-house? What do you think the big mistakes that are made?
Well, it's a lot like parenting. When I want to teach my kids something, I bring someone else in to teach it for me, because it's just like the coaching mentality is just far different. Your team is very close to you, and often your team sees you in the ugliest moments. Okay.
Yeah.
They see you when you're stressed, under the gun, payroll is on Friday, and you're making decisions and working with your team with a scarcity mindset, that really this roller coaster of emotions that happen as entrepreneurs is a struggle for them to also deal with. And you can't get honesty from people you write checks to, because they want you to write the check.
That's a great quote. It's hard to, because they've got to balance the honesty and the check.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really what makes, and there's a ton of other business frameworks to choose from. But I'll tell you, the best value you get is bringing a third party. And this is what we do in EOS. We bring you to another space outside of the business, outside of the workplace. We shut off our phones. We sit together in a room, and I try to get you real. And I try to get you honest and open with every member of the team. And one of the first things we do in our exercises, first is we do what's called a 90-minute meeting with leadership teams. And I basically write down the 6 components of the business. And all we are doing as an EOS implementers is getting a company strong in 6 key areas. 1, come up with a vision. 2, your people, how to make sure you have the right people in the right seats. Data, we lead the business with data, not emotions. Understanding how to handle your issues, how to make sure you have the right processes for the key areas of the business that make sense. And traction is just the meeting pulse of how to get together every single week, get on the same page, and make sure that the rocks are moving forward. So in 90 days, we're kicking things out of the funnel of things that we want to achieve in our business. We teach that in 90 minutes with the leadership team so they can see a full picture. And then we get them in a room for 7 to 8 hours doing what we call a focus day. I had a focus day today, and it was beautiful because we had an outstanding entrepreneur who has built an excellent business, but really have not clearly defined what the roles are in the business. And so coming up with the accountability chart on who does what will spark emotions. Okay. Because that is where your team gets in this room, and I look at body language, and I get Julie to tell the ugly. Maybe it's about the visionary, the owner of the company, of something that no one else has ever said before, and getting that on the table and having open and honest conversations. Because Mark, this is what most companies do. They say to your face what you want to hear, but by their water cooler, they're saying all the shit that should be said to your face, because you can't fix things you don't even know that are broken, but they'll
Right.
keep the broken things from you for lots of reasons, primarily because they write that check.
Yeah.
You write that
And then
check.
in the secondary is because they have to live with around that person. And if you do something about it, how'd they find out about it? Well, Mary told me. And so it's amazing how much you find out once you fire somebody. And you fire them, and then all of a sudden, here comes the truth. Well, you didn't know this, but they were doing this and doing that. I'm like, why the hell wouldn't you tell me this so I could do something about it? Well, and they're like, well, the problem is you would do something about it. I'm like, yeah, but now we have to live with this BS. I'm living in this world that's not real, or I think one way and about another person. Everybody knows the truth. Yep. And so, does that help with this? I mean,
oh yeah, I mean. And you know what's very typical? Like, I'll tell you, the best focus days have tears, have heightened voices. Maybe there's a bit of yelling. I want emotions to come across.
Yeah.
Because if I'm emotional about something, that generally means I care. I'd be more concerned about a group of people that could care less. We don't want careless people working for us. We don't want people that don't care. And, but once you get the emotions out, and then we start to get, we like accountability chart is like, who does what? And, do they get what the role is? Do they want to do it? And last, do they have a capacity to do it?
Right.
And a lot of times when you build in that accountability chart, you'll see the light shining on a key role in the organization where they just don't want it. They don't want the responsibility, or they don't have the resources to do it. So they don't have enough capacity. And so it's our role in terms of an EOS implementer is just to be there listening and help show the way in order to get to that place. We may not get the perfect accountability chart on day one,
of course,
but we're going to formulate in such a way, because we're thinking about 6 to 12 months out. We're not thinking about tomorrow. We're thinking about, what does it look like to have the right people in the right seats first? I don't care who they are today, but let's figure out what the actual position in, and what is the 5 roles for each one of those positions.
So talk about how you, I mean, almost always the visionary is going to be the owner. And then how do you determine, like, it says they're the EOS implementer, but do you also have an implementer inside the company that is like you hand off to them, or how does that work?
So we call that the integrator. See,
integrator. That's
it.
The
yeah. We call that the integrator. Is typically, most organization has sales and marketing, driving revenue, right?
Right.
Then you have an ops, people that deploy the services that were sold. Okay. And we have someone in finance, that making sure that bills are paid and we're staying in budget and those types of things. But you generally want to put like an integrator in a role that is holding these 3 people accountable. And 50% of the time that we talk to an organization, you have a visionary. It's somewhere in the mix. Not all sales, not all organizations actually have a visionary.
Really?
It could be actually an employee in the company, but generally the visionary has lots of big ideas, has the biggest relationships, pretty much the best salesperson, and has a zillion ideas that want to do now, right? And a good integrator in an enterprise is going to understand what your vision is and focus on the vision, getting the vision done, getting our goals and our rocks, which is our 90-day world that we live in, and certain projects that generally take 90 days to do. But that delicate dance of who's leading the company is really what and how an integrator really makes the magic happen.
We've mentioned a couple of times, just for those who haven't read the book, rocks are, like you said, they're the big things that each of us have to do. And it goes back to a demonstration. And we've all heard it from the professor who fills it with fills a container with big rocks. And then it says, is it full? And they said, yeah, it's full. And then he keeps adding smaller stuff until he puts sand in there and then water. And the point of it was, if you don't get the big rocks in first, you would have never got them done, because it's like your time. your time gets filled up with all the million little things. So you got to get the big things done. And so in the traction system, that's what rocks are, the big things that you have to get done. And then can you explain then the next step once you go through those and then you come up with your level 10 meetings? What is that? How does that work? How's that helpful?
Well, first off, let's talk about rocks for a second, because
Sure.
I think most companies they look at the rocks wrong. The rocks are for your people. Your people, when given a strength goal or something that's a little bit outside of their comfort zone, something that they have to work kind of hard at, they got to use some intellectual capacity to get something over a goal line. You can find happiness by doing hard things.
Yep.
When you have, let's say, hourly workers or people in the service business, they have this mentality. They can have a mentality of they're just going through life. But when you give them an opportunity to do and overcome a hard challenge in the business, and you're talking through with them on designing what their individual rocks will be for a quarter, and then every week you're getting an update on where they are in the process. And then when you get to that milestone, that next quarter, and you get it over the finish line and you celebrate that as a team and encouragement, it is exciting to watch them flourish. Because when we are in a state of flow of work where we are literally getting things done because we actually enjoy the process of doing, that's what you get out of getting rocks completed, is the satisfaction of that forward momentum. So
Yeah.
the rocks have much more to do with employee satisfaction than all the benefit that we see as the entrepreneur.
When we were back in the day trying to self-implement, the one thing we stayed pretty good about were the level 10 meetings. And I kept those, and I've looked back, years ahead, and looked back about the struggles that we were facing then, the rocks of the day. And that's another thing that makes you feel good. You're like, wow, that was an issue back then. And that's just a given now, that you've had those things that were a goal and you work through them and you can feel good about those later. I've got a comment here. Chuck Roydhouse, he's a consultant, used to be in the chimney business too. He's still in the chimney business, but he sold his company. Start with a good foundation, set minimum standards and goals, get a good coach to help you implement and hold you accountable, commit and follow through. And he's very much a systems, guy like that. And so when you're working for a company and you say, let's just say it's 10 plus people, a lot of chimney companies are smaller than that.
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend to people who want to get there, but they don't have, like, one reason I love talking to you is because you've built a really big business. And that in my world, that's a huge business. Other people, that's not, 400 people, nothing. But in our world, that's a big business. Well, and then I like talking to people like you, because you can look back at smaller companies, 100 and less people, well, here's the things. And so what would you tell the guys who are 2 people to 9 people, like in that, what would you tell them, traction minded, but not ready for an implementer?
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to some soul searching of what you want to achieve. At the end of the day, let's figure out what we really want. And let's get as many people as we can align with that mission, whether it's my wife, right? She may not be part of the business, but she also works here.
Yeah.
Because when I go to work, she's actually at work with me, believe it or not, right?
Oh, in your business now?
Well, no, I'm just saying in general, because my decision-making tree is influenced by my family.
Right.
So she is with me, right?
Right.
And I say I bring her to work because at the end of the day, we are working for our families, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you verbalize what our vision is, this is a great time of year to talk about what we're going to do in 23. It's a great time to sit here and go, all right, Jim Rohn I love listening to him. I can listen to him all day long, and he tells this story about talking to these group of bankers, and the bankers are like, well, so tell us what this next year is going to be like. He's like, okay, I know exactly what it's going to be like. It's going to be a lot like the same as this year. You know, and it's just like, oh, duh, like it's going to be a lot of the same. And it is going to be the same. What makes it different is what decisions are we making to make it different? What opportunities do we foresee that we want to tackle? You know, and, you know, generally when you come up with your rocks for your business, it's about 5 to 7 things that you want to implement, right?
Yep.
Into the business. And so figure out what those priorities are and go ahead and, you know, set the stake in the ground with your team. These things I want to have done, and have a regular meeting with your team. We call them level 10 meetings. And the way the format of a level 10 meeting is have an agenda, and the suggested agenda that they follow. If you just Google level 10 meeting, you'll see it's super easy. It's a segue. Give me personal and professional good news. All that is making your team talk, right? Open up, start talking. And then you're going to talk about our scorecard. Every business has some metrics that matter, right? You know, and knowing what's on your scorecard, those are predictors to other issues that you're going to have, right? Then we're going to talk about a role recap, which is just, rock recap. Are we on track, off track? It's just a simple equation. Yes, no, maybe so. As we start talking about updates, there's issues that arise. We put on a list. We don't talk about them, right? We're going to do some employee headlines and some customer headlines. So let's say someone gave us a review. Let's celebrate. Let's give recognition to people that are doing good work. Let's make sure we're getting pats on the back for people that are doing good work, because they don't often get that. We often are the worst at this as entrepreneurs. We're the worst at telling our team members how awesome they are. And that is the best currency on the planet, telling someone that they're good, or telling someone they did great work. It's not about the money anymore. Like, they want to know they have done meaningful work. And we are often the only people on the planet that can give that to them.
Yeah.
And so once you do this, we spend 60 minutes. And really the foundation of the rest of the meeting is dealing with issues. So you've made a list of maybe 10 problems that came across over the last 10 days or 7 days. And then you want to prioritize the top 3. And then we go through this process called IDS, identify the issue, discuss it, and solve it. It's just a way to get the issues right off your list. And then we conclude the meeting. But the meeting in the 90 minutes, I mean, a good, well-run 90 minutes a week with your team can dramatically change the trajectory of your business.
And it's very timed out, right? Like, you've determined times of each of those topics that you just came up with. There's 5 minutes for this, there's 10 minutes for that, there's 60 minutes for this. So therefore it doesn't just run on and it's an indefinite, and you definitely got to the end. Like, it's very structured. It was one of the things I liked about it.
And at the very end of it, also, typically the integrator is going to run a proper level 10, but we do a rating system at the end, 1 to 10. How often are we sitting in meetings we got no value out of? Well, when you start getting feedback from the team members that are having to show up to these meetings, and if you have a low score, you're going to have to fix it, right?
Yeah.
But it's really no different than, it's like a professional ball team.
Yeah.
They have practices, and they are well thought out practices. It's not like they just show up, just buckling their belt and putting on their shoes and they're ready. They have prepared for that meeting, and the just amount of energy that it takes to run a proper meeting is about the same energy that you need to prepare for it. So the time up front to that meeting, that's why a good integrator that understands the data, collects all this data, is going to solve a lot of issues, even believe it or not, before the level 10 even starts, by just getting all the data.
What, just looking back at your business career and your business trajectory, what would you say some of the mistakes that you made, if you could look back and talk to yourself, early on or in the middle, in the process, what are some of the things that you wish you could have seen or done differently through your journey?
Well, one of the key things is people deserve to be told 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a hard thing for us to process this thing. And there is science behind this. Don't ask me to recount the study or anything like that. But I used to get super frustrated. I could not tell you how many times, Mark, I would say this. Mark, I told you this last time we got together. I told you, Mark, I already said this. I mean, it was like a reoccurring theme. And listen, your employee has 1,000 other things to worry about. He's got back child support he's playing with. He's got a baby mama drama he's got cooking. He's got car trouble. His mom's got issues of her own that he's having to carry the weight of his personal life, right?
Right.
And so when you come in his little orbit in his universe, you may get lucky one day for him to get one of your sparks of light to absorb in him and move forward. But we have to be ready to be willing to repeat ourselves often, have multiple places and way you communicate, like just like the level 10 meeting, at the end of that meeting, you cascade those messages. So anything you talk to as a leadership team needs to be told to everyone. And one strategy that I use is, because we have to live in this world of telling people 7 times, how can I tell someone many different ways? And so I got really good at figuring out how to do text messaging, drip text messaging for new hires. Okay. Not a lot of people do this, but it makes a huge difference. A lot of times we train people, we just get them into a room and throw up on them, right? All these things they got to do. Well, the important things that they need to learn need to be dripped to them over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens in a lot of businesses, you build a training system on everything they need to know about a particular thing. And then what happens is we have this reoccurring customer issue that keeps showing itself to us. And it'll show up on your issues list, and you'll be training over and over. And you have to figure out a way to share new information to new team members that didn't, have that level of training.
Right.
And so a lot of things are missing in your training when you're onboarding in the first place.
You were talking, and I've got this folder right here. It's a fist bump. Hey, and you put the name, and because you whatever. And this was from one of my mentors at one of his events. And we all in the room just went around and gave each other fist bumps for what we appreciate about them. And to your point, it's so easy to not do that, because as entrepreneurs, very few people are doing it for you. Like almost nobody, it's the bank and the customers and sometimes the employees, but in general, you don't get it. So you think, well, I didn't get it, so they don't need it. And that's a mistake. That's a leadership mistake that people need. Now, not everybody needs it the same. Some people need you to brag on them, and some people hate it if you brag on them. So you got to learn that about your people, about what matters to them. Sometimes it's just a private conversation. Sometimes it's just a word with the boss. Sometimes, they want to be praised in front of everybody and celebrated and cheered and clapped. And in our business, I learned that, we cheer for people. We have a motivational Monday thing. So we all talk about who helped who in the week. And then we cheer, we clap for them. How many times in life do you get clapped for anymore? Almost never as an adult, especially as an adult male. You're not getting clapped for much. You're 40 years old. And you're like, get out there and do your job, like.
I know. It goes a long way. And I think the other thing I learned, and I got this from my business coach, is 7 praises for every reprimand. And that's also a challenge, to tell someone they're awesome, they're awesome, they're awesome and awesome. And like 7 times you gotta, but it makes a huge difference. And especially the younger they are, the more needy they are in some recognition and acknowledgement of performance. And you know, for me, I'm 48. I'm the same way. I'm like, no one's doing this for me, but they need it. And listen, how much does it cost you to recognize someone? Gosh, what is it? A few words out of my mouth that could go a tremendous way. That could,
Yeah.
you know, if you spark their day, they spark your customer's day, right? You
And you
know,
know, also it happens as business owners, like, oh, that's good. And then we move on to the next problem. And if we'll just take a second right then in the middle of the day or whenever it hits you and recognize that person, reach out, even write down a little note, or for us, we got some team things where we celebrate those kind of things. It's you have to have the downside. You have to have the hard conversations too to guide it. It can't be all praise. And I think that's, they call it the Lasada line, where it's 3 praises to every negative for a positive work environment. It's that study they did. And if you can have 6 praises to a negative, then you've got like a world-class work environment.
yes.
If that can be part of your, you know, a part of your culture to do that. But it's so easy just to pick out the negative and every once in a while do a praise. And
yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
And, you know, a lot of that is just a process. You know, if you get a review with an employee's name on it, there should be a process to process the review, meaning,
Yes.
who do I need to thank in front of who? You know, how do I do this? Do I do it in an email? Do I do it in a stand-up meeting?
Yeah.
That, you know, because guess what? You start encouraging that, and listen, people get jealous. And they're going to be like, well, I want to be recognized. And now guess what they're doing? They're
Yeah.
performing in front of a customer to
Yeah.
wow them. And then they're also like, hey, can you do me solid? Can you get on Google and click on this link? And then can you give me a good review? And can you put my name in there? Right.
Exactly. That's what we asked.
But what does
them
it
to
do for you? It jacks up your SEO. It tells other people about what you're doing, and you show up in more searches and you got more customers. And then it's a trickle down.
We got it. That's exactly right. Stacy, she, I did an interview with her not long ago, and she does Action Coach, or she works with them. She's marketing part for them. But I love the idea of drip employee training. I've only heard of drip marketing to customers, and I agree. I'd never heard of that drip training, which is really. She said, "This is brilliant. Are you going to record this? I have to take my son to basketball." Well, thank you for joining us for the time you did. It is recorded. It stays on LinkedIn. It looks like it stays under my profile on LinkedIn, so you can go back and listen to that. But yeah, so did you come up with that drip training idea? Or is that what you did?
Oh, I did that a long time ago. It resulted out of this. Honestly, I would do training, and part of our training was we used to have people pretend to be. We were a Sprint retailer. They would pretend to be Sprint employees, and they would call our store, and they would basically talk our employees into giving out username and passwords to systems to order phones. We would sit in training, right? And we would literally be training them on not to give out this information. Okay. And I had all my calls recorded. In fact, I had to build the system to record all the phone calls and analyze them with AI to notify me if someone were to ever call there. But I would literally train them on Monday, and then someone would call the store on Wednesday, and they would just spit out the username and password.
Oh, no.
And so, I had to come up with processes to re-educate. So we would drip email them, and then we eventually built software to really analyze the call volumes to catch that. Because again, you're think about this. Half their training, when they're doing training, what are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
They're on their phone.
Yeah.
I mean, they are literally in an algorithm, addicted to this electronic device, and trying to get your information is really annoying and frustrating, because they're, they want to get to the next swipe or next post or whatever they're working on, or game or whatever. So it's really hard to show up in their atmosphere. So, drip emails is a function, but also text messaging.
Yeah.
Redirects when they click a link and they have to fill out a form. There's some good real estate. Like in my business, I had a bunch of different forms that you had people fill out. Vacation request, they want to change their schedule. And I would change some of those to go to an internal page that had the current events and things that I want their eyeballs on. They wouldn't click on an email, for instance. The other thing I used to do is I used to track opens from my employees. So if I was sending out the stats for our sales team, I had 300 salespeople. And so I would literally send out individual emails with their sales statistics, and I would check who actually clicked the email to even open those.
Right.
Because that's how you could tell if someone is engaged. If they're engaged enough to look at their employee standings, they're engaged with the business and bought in.
Right. So, thank you for that. Let me ask you this. So I asked you what you should have done earlier, which was praise. What was a big win for you, or what did you learn over the time that was like, that was a good move, or that really was a good thing?
Well, well, I tell you just, I guess one habit that changed the business dramatically, and that is when we got our core values done and like really, really good. I would do a 90-minute onboard with my salespeople to teach them our core values. And the way you navigate and build your core values became my sales strategy. And so mixing those together, and just like for you, and if I were just to try to mimic the same example, when someone came in my store, my purpose for my sales team is to generate a feeling of I care.
Yes.
And that was a feeling I was trying to make a customer feel like when they came into my store, that my salesperson cared about them. So I had certain steps. Number one, if you walked in my store, you had to stand and greet them at the door, and then find out their name, and then use your name in the conversation. That simple act made us the number one sprint retailers in the Southeast, just because we had a process.
Yeah.
And how I had to teach that process was coming from a different way. And that was when I onboarded new hires and I did my 90-minute meeting where I taught them not how to work at Absolute Wireless. I taught them how to create value and sell and get purpose out of what we do every single day. And you do that by building relationships with strangers that walk in the door. Mm-hmm. It may be the chancellor of Vanderbilt University and he's got a suit on. It could be a homeless dude. But you got to walk and work with all types. It could be a chimney sweep guy. Yeah, exactly.
Coming in all dirty.
Yes. Yeah. But that first interaction with your customer determines the next customer. That's it.
Yeah. You guys, I mean, you didn't know. You guys were great. You guys were a great service provider. A lot better than today when you walk in and you don't know the people behind the thing. They change every couple of days. They don't know you. Like you guys had a personality behind you, and you were like our guys. You know what I mean? And in that one specific branch, it was at Trousdale and 65.
That was my first store. It was. But getting a way to connect with your employees, to do it in a way that was just like you if you were there.
Yeah, and I don't think I would see you in the background, but you weren't the guy taking care of me. But your people, it was very personal. And so you did a great job with that. You walk the walk. Let's switch subject just a little bit. I know part of also what you do is sales. You do sales training and help people in sales. And what is that you do, and how do you help customers that way?
So I started a CRM called Call Proof. It's built for outside sales people, door to door, people that are selling to businesses. And through that process, we have over 100 clients all throughout different industries. But I discovered there's a great book by Jack Daly called Hyper Sales Growth. Mm-hmm. And it is an excellent book if you're interested in managing a sales team. One of the first rules it teaches you is owners make terrible sales managers. Mm-hmm. And they make terrible sales managers because if you're struggling to make payroll on Friday, but yet you're meeting with your sales team on Monday and you're thinking with scarcity, that comes across to your sales team. And that desperation will create bad behaviors by your sales team. And it's just good to have someone else on your team that's leading the salespeople in an abundance mindset But we built a platform to basically track the daily activities for outside salespeople by using our app.
So, we're going through a little bit of that right now. We had some pretty big changes in our systems, some confusion in our sales force. We're fighting against the economy that's softening from hyper. Everybody was buying everything to all of a sudden they're judging, thinking about it, not doing it. And we've noticed we fixed some things. So our profitability is actually up on less sales, which a lot of people are like, oh, that's great, but it doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel great to not have more profit but less sales, and it's hard to think and not do that scarcity mindset, because if we keep having lower sales, like we're doing more smaller jobs instead of several really big jobs and sprinkle with small jobs, so it's like a thing that's happened. How would you lead that meeting when you need your guys to step up? You need to be sensitive to the environment, because we always think we're smarter than we are. Like the tide goes up and we think we're brilliant business people, and the tide goes out and we think we're terrible. Like, how do you navigate that meeting when it's not desperate, but it's, hey, if we keep going down this road, we're going to have some hard decisions to make. We've got to kind of turn the ship around. What would you say?
Well, honestly, being aware of your emotional energy is super critical. A lot of people walk around without any awareness. They're just going, you look at your calendar. I got to show up to this team and I got to be positive, right? I don't know, going into a meeting with a negative mindset is never going to be good, right? Now, deciding when you show up and give them negative things is all about calendaring. Okay. Think about it like this. If I deplete you of energy at 8 in the morning, or I could deplete your energy at 5 in the evening, which is better for business?
5 in the evening. Interesting.
So it's just changing the timing can be powerful, right? So if I can get them with bad news, let it be at the end of the day. So maybe you're pointing out some faults they have, or they showed up or did something wrong, or they made a mistake, and you got to let them know and hold them accountable, right? Well, accountability stings, it hurts. It physically hurts. And then guess who also feels the sting is the customer.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so, but you got to hold them accountable. You got to have the uncomfortable conversations. But one of the things that took me forever to learn, I was terrible at it, having uncomfortable conversations. Terrible. I'm still bad at it. I still have to purposely force myself. It's like walking into a cold shower. It's like, I don't want to do it, but a little practice of doing something uncomfortable. It actually, it's definitely a skill that you can get better at.
On sales too, I noticed that some of my guys, they'll be like, their sales will be up or down, but the guys who are like new and see it as an opportunity or excited tend to sell more. And that's tough when, you've been selling for years, you've seen the ups and downs, and that's just your job, versus the guy that's new in it and he's killing it because it's new and he sees it all as an opportunity, yet he doesn't have the experience and he might be selling the wrong thing or over promising. But how do you keep I guess that's just part of being a professional salesperson. You just keep that certain energy, but how do you get that back? Or what would you tell a sales team that's, been through some times, but it's very obvious when they're excited versus when they're not?
Well, first off, most organizations have really shitty sales meetings, or no sales meeting at all. Or they have a sales meeting where sales manager's doing all the talking. Boring, not interesting. Sales meetings are meant for other salespeople who are winning to tell me how you're winning.
That's
I'm here to learn how you closed that deal last week. I want to learn what you're going to do next week. I want to learn what you accomplished last week. So good, effective sales meetings start off with what you do last week, what you're going to commit to next week. Tell me a story. Tell me the story about You went to talk to Mary and you find out it's a $13,000 fix. And you got to give her this bad news. And she says, get the hell out of here. You're crazy. Ain't going to spend $13,000. Well, how'd you turn that into a sale?
Yeah.
That's what I care about. That's
Yeah.
all your salespeople care about. They want
Right.
to hear stories.
Yep.
And so, and he's, as you like, one of the things the Hyper Sales Growth book, Jack Daly teaches is every business only has 8 objections. If you know how to answer each objection in the right way, you're going to be able to overcome objections. But the other part of the story is, how do you overcome objections in a different way? You build better rapport and then you don't get objections.
Correct.
So, it's, but the purpose is, when you got that new young buck with energy, right? You got to get your existing salespeople to tell their stories and help inspire that. And the young buck will inspire the old cats too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because
true.
when he sees young buck chasing it and crushing it, he's like, well, shit, I'm not going to let this dude outwin me. Right.
Yeah.
No, that lifts everyone's ships. And you got a good sales manager keeps it positive. If they're whining and bitching about, XYZ, or no, that's not what the sales meeting is for. If you're upset about the comp, that's a you and me private conversation. And if you want to whine about it, I'm cool with it, but you don't whine about it with the team, because guess what? Your negative energy is costing everyone money.
Yeah.
That's why we stay positive in our sales meetings. Positive sales meetings is critical. If you have a kick-ass sales meeting first part of the day, you're celebrating the wins, you're overcoming past obstacles by doing proper role practice. So you literally practice someone telling you no, and how do you respond to it? But anyway, I hope that answers that.
It does. I thank you for your time. We got a couple more minutes. I want to ask you about one more thing. This was from Chuck. He said, we had this in the fire department. I think he was talking about praise. We had 10 attaboys to wipe out the one, oh shit, and get praise was almost impossible. So old school management for sure. Yeah. So, old school, it was rare to get praise, and that really doesn't fly as well anymore. So we have to be cognizant of what works today and why people are working for you. So we got a couple minutes. Tell me about, I heard you did that program, 75 Hard, that workout program, and it's a mental toughness program as much as anything.
Yeah. And, part of the reason I do this work is, when I sold my business in 2020, I went through a freaking dump. Like, I was struggling to pick myself up. I was struggling. Such of my identity was attached to this other thing I did.
Yeah.
And I was just really not happy, to be honest with you. And I needed some kind of new discipline in my life. And I'd heard a bunch of friends of mine talk about 75 Hard. 75 Hard is a diet, no alcohol, 75 days of 2 workouts a day, 1 outside.
Has to be outside.
Yeah, it has to be outside. 10 minutes of reading and a gallon of water, right? Yeah. And when I first discovered the workout program, I found out that the guy who invented this program, he owns a supplement company, right? Mm-hmm. And he has a book. I went and got his book, and the first chapter is, how do you find happiness? Because at the time I was not in a happy place. And it talks about, you find happiness when you overcome hard things. So basic, right? When we accomplish something, a mission or task or something, it feels good.
Yeah.
And so the program is very challenging. If you miss a day, I missed one, you have to take a picture of yourself every day.
Every day, that's right.
But if you miss something, in full transparency, I missed the picture, but I did not restart the program like you're supposed to. But I followed the program. I got super fit, but it's exhausting. Number one, the hardest thing of all those things is drinking a gallon of water, because it makes you incredibly unproductive, because you're having to whiz every 25 minutes, right? But it also forces you to get your calendar right. It forces you to eliminate the bullshit in our calendar that's taking up space. And it really gets you really efficient on your calendar and just your day to day. And so it's a really great exercise. No, it's for sure a great exercise in getting fit. But it's really better at the disciplines of winning. It's
Yeah.
just disciplines. Winning is just disciplines. That's all.
Yeah, my friend Jake Loeffler did it. He's a partner of mine in this business, and he went through it, and he showed me his pictures last night. We were at a dinner, and he showed me every picture. And he showed me the first one, because you do it without your shirt on for a man. You would do it like in a sports bra and shorts for a girl or something, but you show your body, right? You may not like the way it looks, but at the end, if you do it, it looks different, right?
It looks dramatically different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. That outside workout, that could be tough, in the wintertime or storming or in the middle of the summer when it's super hot. But
and the purpose of forcing you outside is it's going to rain. And what do? You do the work.
Right.
Sometimes, even with obstacles, like you just realize that, all right, it doesn't change the fact that it must be done.
Yeah. And sometimes they said you kind of look forward to it raining so you could be out there. Nobody's out there. You say, look, I'm still doing the work.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
I have one more question before we close out. This is a friend of ours, Diane. She says, two-part question. Can an integrator also be an implementer on the team effectively? And should a member of the team hold more than one role? That's a great question.
Well, all of these are kind of true, but can an integrator also be an implementer? Well, an implementer is usually a third party that is helping a company along the way fully and be that outside person in an outside environment, pulling a session, which is an all-day session, walking them through EOS. But it can be, and what's very popular in our space is there are fractional integrators that are available, and all they do is run your level 10 meeting. They capture all the scorecard data and they manage the meeting because maybe someone else in the team is just not strong enough to do it. And so that's actually really popular right now for people to hire an outside person just to be an integrator and just run those level 10 meetings and then be in those sessions, all day sessions.
So you're saying it kind of is, but it's better if the roles are different people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me just write down here. Your email is robert@callproof.com.
That's right.
Let me just put this in the notes here, add banner. And so let's show this real quick. So if people want to get in touch with you, are you that too? Can you be a fractional integrator? Like what is your business?
So my primary business is I work with typically sales organizations when it comes to helping them manage their field sales team. I am also a EOS implementer, and I can travel. So I could go to someone's location and spend a day going through the process. And it starts with booking a call with me where I can do just a general conversation with you and bounce some ideas off if this is a fit for you. And if it's something you have some real interest in, you really got to get your team involved. Yeah. And you do that by booking a 90-minute, it's a free session with me. I can do it on Zoom. And basically I teach you all these things in 90 minutes. And you can either decide to implement it yourself, or if you need to hire someone like me, that's an option too.
Do you recommend people read the book first?
Well, people absolutely read the book. Don't get me wrong. But what I can do for a leadership team is make the book come alive.
Right.
And that's where it really matters.
The book can get kind of dry. It's pretty.
Oh yeah. And the other thing too, it's like, hey, read this book. And you know what I learned through the 75 Hard? Do you know how hard it is to read a book these days?
I know.
I mean, literally, you get into like, 2 paragraphs and you're like, oh, there's my phone buzzing. I gotta go see.
Right. Exactly.
And so and then you get people that will listen to the book and it's not the same.
Right.
Listening to it, reading it. And so what I try to do is like really make it come alive to it matters. And then when we kind of draw it out and you understand how the time-space learning equates to forward momentum and how
Mhm.
it actually works. Because a lot of people read the book and like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Well, there's a time and place to do this because your team is running a business and you're giving them a lot of work to throw in their table. And it's without the right space, it's overwhelming and people, they lose focus and they can't get it done.
Yeah.
It's because it's too much.
Well, man, thank you so much for your hour of time and your enlightenment, and I really appreciate it. I look forward to having you down at our summit.
I'm
And
excited. This will be
yeah,
fun.
yeah, we're excited to have you too. And I love your story and the way you talk to us. I'm excited for you to do the keynote and the workshop with us. So thank you for everything.
Thanks, Mark. You guys have a great one.
Everybody, have a good night. Thanks.
See
See
you.
ya. Hope you guys enjoyed that with Robert. When I first met him, we didn't have too long to talk, but I knew that was a guy that knew what he was talking about. And I always like those kind of people who have they're ahead of us. They've been down that road further. They know what that battle looks like. And also he's entrepreneurial, so he has multiple businesses. And to me, that speaks to me because that's a different type of person. I had a meeting today with a person who, without going into too many details, talked a lot, but accomplished very little. And, you look back at what the accomplishments are. And to me, the people who have figured out how to get it done are the ones that I want to hear from. Those are the ones that have the tactics, have the humility a lot of times because they've been through the battle. They're not just overviewing it. They come back to it and they can tell you some real stories about how things work. So hope you enjoyed, Robert. That's our time for this week. I'll be back next week for the holiday edition before we take a little break for the holidays. So join us next week. Thank you for all your views. Thank you for your comments, and we'll talk to you soon. See you.